Sure. Yeah, I mean. Good? Okay, perfect. Thank you for being here. Good morning and welcome. My name is Jamie Smith. I'm the Deputy Chief, PIO, and Fire Marshal for the St. Paul Fire Department. On behalf of the St. Paul Fire Department, Department of Public Safety, Minnesota State Patrol, St. Paul Police, and other public safety partners, thank you for joining us today as we come together to deliver this important public safety message about driving safe during this holiday season. We want to extend our gratitude to the members of the media for covering this critical issue and helping us reach as many Minnesotans as possible during this busy holiday travel season.
Here's 1435 Grand Avenue.
We'll pause for just a second here.
Albert Street South and Pascal Street South, box 757, on fire off 4, time 1100. Here's 1435 Grand Avenue. Behavioral emergency, cross streets, Albert Street South and Pascal Street South, box 757, on fire off 4, time 1100.
Duty never rests, right? Sorry for that. So today's press conference underscores our shared commitment to keeping our roads and communities safe. You'll hear from a lineup of distinguished speakers who know all too well the consequences of impaired driving. You'll hear from Mike Hansen, Director of the Office of Traffic Safety, Colonel Christina Bogich of the Minnesota State Patrol, and Assistant Fire Chief Jeremiah Melquist. They will highlight the role of emergency responders and the impact of roadway safety on our teams and commitments. They will highlight They will highlight the role of our emergency responders and the impact of roadway safety on our teams and communities. At the conclusion of our press conference, we will have an opportunity for members of the media to interview today's speakers. Thank you for being here today, and with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Director of the Office of Traffic Safety, Mike Hansen.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I'd like to start by thanking St. Paul Fire for being able to host us this morning for this media event and for the important message that we're all going to share with you and with all of Minnesota this morning. My name is Mike Hansen, and I have the privilege of serving as the Director for the Department of Public Safety's Office of Traffic Safety. I want to share with you, first of all, a rather alarming statistic, and this should really cause a great deal of concern for everybody who hears this. Last year in the state of Minnesota, nearly 27,000 people were arrested for impaired driving offenses. 27,000. That's an incredible and an unacceptable number, and that should cause every one of us to have a little bit of pause and a little bit of fear as we begin to travel during this holiday season. There is no excuse for getting behind the wheel if you are impaired. There are too many options out there today for you to make a safe, smart decision and have a plan to get home safely without putting yourself and everybody else you're sharing the road with in danger because of one fateful, horrific, tragic decision. It doesn't matter if it's drugs or if it's alcohol or if it's prescription drugs or any type of substance that makes you feel different. If you feel different, you will drive different. Impaired is impaired, and it's that simple. Here's another alarming statistic from this year, and this one really causes me a great deal of concern, it causes me anger, and it causes me frustration. As of today, we are 64 fatalities ahead of where we were at this time last year. 418 families will have an empty table at Thanksgiving this year because somebody made a mistake or a bad decision behind the wheel. That's not acceptable in any book. The only number that's acceptable when we talk about traffic fatalities is 0. And we can do that here in Minnesota if we all commit to making good, smart, safe decisions behind the wheel. We know that there are people who are making good, sober choices and are making their way home safely by using all of the available options out there. But we also have to have a backup plan for those who still make that fateful decision. And that's why you see standing behind me first responders from across the state of Minnesota. These are the folks that go out there every day, every night. They put their lives on the line when a crash happens in order to render aid and to get that scene cleared up. You see peace officers, first responders, tow truck drivers, everybody who is involved in crash scene management and crash scene cleanup is represented here. These are the first responders who jump into action, who save lives, and clear that road for all of us. Part of our strategy is the media event that we're participating in today, but we have other components to that. We have our law enforcement officers who will be out there working extra shifts, working overtime to help ensure that Minnesota roads are safe for all during this holiday season. As we all know, our first responders and our peace officers are often the first ones on the scene of these horrifically tragic incidents that take place on our roadways. We owe them a debt of gratitude, but we also owe them the space that they need to work safely at roadside. So if you come upon that scene, you have to slow down, you have to move over and give them room to work. We have firefighters and paramedics represented behind us. These are the folks that go to that scene. They cut these cars apart. They get the victims out there and they give them the aid that they need in order for them to survive that tragic event that just occurred. Again, we owe them all a debt of gratitude, and we all owe them a safe place to do their work at roadside. We also have tow truck drivers here. Often kind of the unsung heroes of crash scene management. Okay, we get to the scene, we get the victims treated, we get the scene controlled, now we've got to clean it up. Our tow truck drivers are very skilled, they're very knowledgeable, they're very trained, and they get there and they get the scene cleaned up quickly, so we reduce congestion, we reduce secondary incidents, and we make the road safe for everybody to travel. We're asking all of you to drive sober this winter for the simple reason, and that is to save lives. Minnesota, we can get to zero, but we cannot accept 27,000 bad decisions on our road. No way, no how. This holiday season, give the gift of planning a sober ride so that other drivers and first responders can also have that safe holiday season. We want you to enjoy your holiday traditions and all the favorite foods and drinks and family gatherings and friends and all the things that go with this season. But you just have to have a safe plan and a safe ride if you are going to be partaking in anything that is going to impair you. Every first responder standing behind me has a story to share about a crash that maybe changed their life or left a lifelong impact on them. And you're going to hear some of those today. Don't give them a new story. Do not give them a new story. We need to make better decisions behind the road, Minnesota. For tomorrow, starting tomorrow, through the end of December, the Office of Traffic Safety will be working with roughly 300 agencies across the state of Minnesota for extra DWI enforcement. Again, our goal is not to fill up the jails. Our goal is not to arrest as many people as we can. It's prevention. Because by the time that arrest takes place, somebody has already made that bad decision, and we need to change that paradigm. If you have to ask yourself, should I drive, it's already too late, because you should not drive. Again, as my message was earlier, impaired is impaired, and if you feel different, you will drive different. So we will have officers, troopers, and deputies across the state out there working extra hard between now and the end of December to make sure that we keep our roads safe. Thank you for attending today, and now for some remarks, I'd like to turn it over to Colonel Bogich.
Good morning. I'm Colonel Christina Bogich. I have the honor and privilege of serving as the Colonel of the Minnesota State Patrol. The holiday seasons are a time to come together and celebrate. But today we are also asking Minnesotans to stand together and make a pledge to never drive impaired. This means planning ahead by having a safe ride home and speaking up to stop someone you love from getting behind the wheel if they're under the influence. When there's a crash involving an impaired driver, it doesn't only impact the people here who have to rush to the scene to help, but there are ripple effects that are felt across our communities and individual families. Already, there have been more than 418 deadly crashes across Minnesota this year. That's 64 more people who have died this year than last year, and this is unnecessary, unacceptable, and preventable. We must remember that these statistics are much more than numbers. They're parents, brothers and sisters, wives, husbands, children and friends robbed of future holidays at the dinner table, making memories with their loved ones and celebrating those life milestones that we all hold so dear. There is nothing harder than having to knock on a family's door and tell them that their loved one didn't make it home because someone made the decision to get behind the wheel and drive impaired. These crashes are difficult for everyone that's involved and stay with those first responders and families for an entirety. I will not ever forget responding to a crash 15 years ago where there were 5 fatalities. It included a newborn and a 2-year-old. I watched my partner stand next to the newborn, knowing there wasn't anything he could do. Making the notification to family members of this horrific crash, these types of memories do not go away. Our troopers work hard and are committed to keeping Minnesota roads safe, but we cannot do it alone. So as you gather to celebrate in the days ahead, think of everything at stake when you or someone you know decides to drive impaired. One bad decision isn't worth spending a holiday behind bars because you were arrested for drunk or drug driving. It isn't worth hurting yourself or loved ones in the car with you. And it certainly isn't worth taking the life of another innocent person and turning another family's holiday into an irreversible tragedy. Enjoy the holidays and have fun, but don't get behind the wheel impaired. It's not worth the risk. I'll now turn it over to Assistant Fire Chief Jeremiah Melquist.
Good morning. My name is Jeremiah Melquist. I'm Assistant Fire Chief Operations for St. Paul Fire. Thank you for the opportunity to share my perspective as a firefighter and EMS responder for the last 24 plus years. Over the years, I've responded to countless emergencies, but one crash remains etched in my memory. An impaired driver was speeding through an alley. At an intersection, they T-boned another vehicle with such force that it tore that vehicle in half. The front half of that car spun into a detached garage, which collapsed on top of the unconscious driver. When we arrived, our structural collapse team worked to stabilize the garage while firefighters used the jaws of life to access the victim inside the mangled car. Only then could we begin treating the driver. That one reckless choice caused devastation. A life was gravely impacted, responders placed themselves in immediate danger, and property was destroyed, all because someone chose to drive impaired. As first responders, we see the ripple effects of these crashes far too often. Impaired driving isn't just a bad decision, it's a decision that can change or end lives in an instant. As we approach the holiday season, I want to leave you with this. Every choice you make behind the wheel has the power to save a life, yours, your passengers, the lives of others on the road. Make the decision to drive sober, plan ahead, and be responsible. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, to make it home safely to our loved ones, to celebrate together, and to create memories that bring joy, not heartbreak. Let's ensure this holiday season is one of safety, connection, and care for one another. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the planned remarks that we have for today's press conference. The speakers and individuals behind me are available now for questions or individual interviews if you see fit. Okay, do we want to do that, take questions here, or do we want to do that offline? Okay, yeah, we can certainly take them here. So does anybody have a question for one of the speakers here or one of the folks? Sure. Sure, absolutely. Director Hansen will answer that.
Thanks, Tim. That's a good question. The extra enforcement events that will be taking place are basically high visibility saturation patrols. Sobriety checkpoints are not allowed in Minnesota based on a court decision from a number of years ago. And so what we will do is we will saturate an area with extra patrol officers, extra troopers, officers, and deputies that will concentrate in an area that has a historic or a data-driven problem with impaired driving. And so the saturation patrol is basically what you're going to see. And it will be taking place all across the state, not just in the metro area or any place specifically. It takes place across the state.
And while you're out there, can you talk about are we seeing more cannabis impaired than drug driving? Are you seeing more drug driving?
It's a little hard to quantify that. What I can give you a couple of examples. If we compare a current 5-year period with the previous 5-year period, and we look at the number of drug-impaired driving arrests that took place across the state of Minnesota, comparing those two time periods, in the most current 5-year period that we have the data for, drug-impaired driving arrests are up about 92%. Now, is that cannabis or what all is it? And a lot of that data predates the legalization of cannabis, and we don't have enough real hard data to indicate that we're seeing that uptick. What I can tell you is, in the last couple of years, we've seen an uptick in the number of body fluid samples that officers are having to obtain. And that's the type of sample that you need if you have a drug-impaired arrest or circumstances just don't allow a breath test as it does for alcohol.
So those numbers are included in the 24,000, or is that just alcohol?
Yes, that would be included in that 27,000.
Could you explain actually the monetary cost of the DWI?
The monetary cost for an impaired driving arrest, I can throw out some ballpark figures, but it's going to be somewhat individualistic. But let's just look, license reinstatement, that's over $700. If you look at the criminal fines, those can be over $1,000, usually they're in the area of $500. There's lost wages because somebody is sitting in jail or has to spend some additional time in jail. One of the most significant costs is going to be your insurance. I think if you talk to any insurance agent out there, when somebody does wind up with an impaired driving conviction on their record, they go on high risk and not for a limited period of time. That is a longer period of time. So, I've seen numbers anywhere from the average cost being $10,000, $12,000, and on up from there. And there's all kinds of other tangential costs that probably go with that as well. But those are probably the biggest drivers right there.
Thank you, Director. Any other questions for the individuals here? Okay. I'm seeing none. We will be available here for if you have individual interviews that you'd like to do. We'll have the individuals stay on scene here for another few minutes. Thank you for coming. Appreciate your coverage on this, and everybody have a good Thanksgiving.